Hey everyone, it's Colin. How's it going? You asked for it and I'm happy to oblige. So how about some more stories from when I worked at a computer store in the late 90s? I was really rather surprised by the response to the previous episode where I talked about working at a computer store back in the late 90s. It was really just a huge waffle on my part. I figured I wanted to try something different with the podcast instead of something so tech heavy or, one of those really makes you think kind of episodes. And a lot of people came back with some really interesting and fun stories of their own from that time period or around it. And the most common comment that I got on that episode was that you wanted to hear more stories. So I figure, all right, let's go for it. I don't really have a whole lot of super hilarious stories because, you know what, it was work. This was a job. And we tried to remain professional whenever we could. There weren't a whole lot of antics or anything going on, at least on the part of the employees, mostly because it was a relatively small shop. And the owners, I don't want to call them jerks or anything because they were nice people, but they ran a pretty tight ship. So we didn't really get much opportunity to screw around or anything like that. But sometimes some funny situations would develop on their own. And as I remember them, I'm happy to share them with you. But I figure it would also be interesting to maybe just talk about what that store was like, because I think it can go to illustrate just how big things have changed between the late 90s and now, both in terms of computing, but also in retail in general. So let's get started. I don't really want to name names or anything like that, but the store that I worked at was in a kind of small to medium-sized town in a rural part of the state. We were the town that a lot of people who lived in the truly rural areas would drive into to do all their shopping because they otherwise just didn't have the same resources. This was not a huge town by any means. There was literally one Target store in the entire town. There wasn't a whole lot of stuff to do. There were like a few high schools. There was one or two colleges. We had kind of a mix of stuff going on, but if you wanted to get to the next bigger town where you had many more options to buy things, do things, see things, you were pretty much going to be driving back to the Minneapolis, St. Paul metro area, the Twin Cities, and that was a bit over an hour away. So we had a lot of people from these rural areas driving to our city because, we had, for the most part, what they were looking for, and it saved them that extra hour on their trip. It was really interesting because during the week, you'd see just the people who generally lived in town, and business wasn't that brisk on weekdays. But weekends were absolutely crazy. And what I came to realize was that all of the people who lived in the rural areas, specifically these farmers, they would take one weekend a month and do all of their shopping then. So they would get in the truck on Friday night, drive into town, stay in a hotel overnight, spend all day shopping on Saturday, stay in the hotel again Saturday night, do a little bit more shopping on Sunday morning, and then get back in the truck and drive back home Sunday afternoon. So these people were on a mission when it came to buying stuff because they generally had a lot of stuff they had to get and not a whole ton of time to do it because they had one opportunity every month generally to do it. So weekends were pretty crazy and people were quick to make decisions. So, you'd look at like a big expensive purchase. Back then the average new computer price, both the tower and the monitor and a few accessories, was probably about $1,500. You would think that for that kind of money, and you take the cost of inflation now, and that's going to be well over $2,000 now. For the average person, the average family, they're going to debate that for a while. They're going to think about it, maybe give it a week, give it a couple of weeks to think, is this really the one that I want? Do the research, that sort of thing. But a lot of these folks that would come in on the weekends and buy computers, we'd spend maybe 20 minutes talking to them about the computer and what it can do and how it would meet their needs. And they'd be like, okay, sold. And we'd be like, oh, okay, wow, that was quick. And then they'd sidle up to the counter to get rung up, and we'd, ring them up in the point of sale system and everything. And we'd, tell them what their total was. And normally we would expect for a purchase like that, a check or credit card. Nope. They'd go straight cash. They'd pull out this giant wad of $100 bills and just start peeling them off, because that's the way they operated. I guess they would just take a big chunk of cash and, that's how much they had to spend during the weekend. So spend it wisely, I suppose. But it was really interesting seeing some of these people just rolling in and, really quickly making a decision. This is the computer that they want, and start peeling off them $100 bills, laying them on the counter, making it rain, although that's not what they called it back then, to buy these computers. And of course, it put a lot of pressure onto us because we knew that these people had long drives ahead of them. Because we offered a warranty on everything, we would get not just their name and their phone number, but also their address in case we ever need to ship anything to or from them, whatever. And a lot of these people were from hours away, if not across the state border. So we knew when customers like that came in that we had to sell them a computer that would just work, because it would be hours for them to get home. And if something happened when the computer was at home or when they got it home, maybe the machine was DOA or whatever, that it would then be hours for them to come back, and they'd probably be really, really upset if they had to come back for something like that. So one thing that put a lot of pressure on us was not only, did we have generally a lot of store traffic going on at that time, Saturdays and earlier in the day on Sundays, but we would need to test everything because we just did not want to run the risk of them coming back. If you remember from the previous episode, this was a smaller mom and pop computer store. It was a one-off and independent. So word of mouth was absolutely crucial to this store's survival, considering that literally 2 blocks away was a Best Buy. So we had to make sure that they had a really good experience. So we'd have to unbox everything. We'd unbox the tower and the monitor. We'd even test keyboards, mice. We'd take the printer out of the box if they bought one of those. We'd install the ink cartridges for them. We'd install the drivers for the printer on the computer. We'd hook everything up on a cart, and we'd show them, look, here's everything. Maybe before we started doing that, we'd tell them, okay, go to lunch, come back in like 45 minutes. We'll get you, all wrapped up here, help you load it in your truck. We'd test everything out, make sure that it had to work 100%. But we'd occasionally have days when we'd sell 3 or 4 full systems. And that was a big day for us, right? I mean, 3 or 4 full computers was like, holy crap, what's going on? Like, we're selling more than we've ever done before. But that put a lot of pressure on us because we had to find room for 3 or 4 full computers. And this store was not very big, and we stocked surprisingly a lot of stuff. Or at least surprisingly, when you consider today retail and electronics and especially computer parts. I don't know about where it is that you live, but here for me in the Twin Cities, there really aren't very many places where you can buy specific computer components. For the most part, you're hitting up the internet to buy it these days. Back then, though, in 1999 and 2000, internet sales really weren't that big of a thing yet. So retail was still where it's at if it wasn't, just straight up mail order, like you're looking through a paper catalog and calling up to order something. So we tried to stock a decent number of parts because we knew we were one of only a few games in town that could do it. There were a couple other kind of mom and pop computer stores that had different reputations. One of them I remember was really focused more on serving businesses. Another one also sold stuff like stereos and car stereo speakers and TVs and stuff like that. They, just happened to do computers on the side. And nobody liked them. No one liked going to that particular store because their sales reps were jerks, quite frankly. They didn't respect your opinion. If you said, oh, I'm looking for this brand of thing because I've had good luck with that, they say, no, you don't want that. That's crap. You need to buy this other thing. If you believe anyone else, you're an idiot, blah, blah, blah. We try to be complete opposite of that. So not only do we want to offer really good customer service, but we tried to stock a lot of parts and a lot of just systems and computer stuff in general. We did, of course, carry full systems. We had brand new pre-built systems, and we'd get them from what they call white box manufacturers. These were companies that would basically sell unbranded computers. You can think of it as being like if you were to go on Amazon or Newegg or, wherever now and buy all the parts you wanted for a computer, just separate, and put it together yourself. Think of that, but an entire company dedicated to doing just that. These weren't name brands. These weren't, HP or Dell or back then IBM, now Lenovo, anything like that. These were companies that just built the systems that other businesses wanted to buy and resell, but they didn't put a brand name or anything on it. So that's the majority of what our brand new systems were. We did a few in-house systems. We tried it every once in a while where we would actually just build the towers ourselves in-house from parts that we had on hand. All new parts and everything. These were brand new computers. But what we found was that our parts cost, because we were such a one-off store, a small store, our parts cost never really made it worth it when you also factored in having to pay one of the employees time to put that system together. It almost always came out to be cheaper to just buy a white box that was spec'd the way we wanted it. But we did a few custom builds. At least by the time that I was done working there, when I moved on to college in 2001, we had started to get into kind of a, let us build a custom computer for you type of thing, where we had a form that customers could fill out and they could say what CPU they wanted and how much RAM, how much hard drive, that sort of thing. And we'd do a custom build like that in-house, of course, with the knowledge that it was going to be a bit of a price premium. We didn't sell brand new any name brand towers. Again, because we were a one-off store, it was hard to get the kind of licensing, distribution deals from a bigger vendor like HP or Dell or, Compaq, I think actually hadn't merged with HP yet at that point. We couldn't get the kind of deals we needed to be competitive in that regard. Best Buy down the street, they kind of ate our lunch when it came to high volume, low price sales. But like I said in the previous episode, and not to, talk trash about people who worked at Best Buy then or now, they were high volume, low price sales. They just wanted to get people in and out of the store. They wanted to, oh, you want a computer? Okay, here's the special of the week. You want this one? Okay, fine. There's the checkout. Goodbye. Whereas we actually wanted to listen to what the customer said they wanted out of a computer. So we went higher margin, a little bit higher price, but better customer service. So when, you'd get to spend the time with a customer coming up with the exact build that they wanted, after, 45 minutes to an hour of going through all the options and explaining it to them honestly, I think a lot of people were willing to spend the extra bit of money at that point, having, the store I worked at build them one instead of just buying some pre-built thing where who knows what the quality of the components inside is. We also sold used computers, and most of them came as trade-ins from customers. And we sold used machines, one, because it allowed us to sell computers at a lower price point, because there were people who were just getting into computers at the time and didn't have a ton of money to spend on it because maybe they weren't sure that they even really wanted one. This was the late 90s after all. Not everyone had a computer or even knew how to use one like they do today. But we also wanted to have a variety of systems available, from older to newer, to serve all the different purposes, price points, needs, and also offer an incentive for people who wanted to buy a new computer from us. If we offered their old one in on trade, or we gave them, a couple $100 for it, that would offset the price of the new machine and, kind of maybe sway things in our favor in terms of the sale. And those were probably the best deals as far as the business aspect of the store, because we basically got to sell two computers at that point. Not only would we sell them a brand new machine for admittedly not a huge margin, maybe 30% at that point in time, and I know margins on full computers are even lower now, but we would also take their machine in trade and then be able to resell it. And our margin on used machines was a bit higher, sometimes up to 50%. Of course, they saw it as a great opportunity because we would help make sure that we'd get their data transferred from the old one to the new one, get them all set up on the new computer, securely wipe the drive on the old one, and they'd get a price break in the process. So, hey, it's just like trading in a car. Why not? It made the whole transaction very easy. We did sell used Macs, and as I was the Mac tech, primary Mac tech at that store, of course I was in high school, so this was a part-time job for me. It was a bummer that we couldn't sell new ones, but as I remember, Apple was very picky about who they opened up, business deals with to resell their products. And unfortunately, the one and only place in town for a while that could sell Macs was that jerk other store that also sold TVs and stereos and stuff. Eventually, Apple started selling through Best Buy and Sears of all places. So we started to see more machines like that sold in town, which was good because that meant that we would get more machines in for service for us to fix. But we did sell used Macs, and they generally didn't last very long. We had a decent assortment, but everything that stayed on the floor for a while was generally pretty old. That said, there were a couple of occasions where I really kicked myself for not having picked up a used Mac when I could have. I mean, used PCs are plenty of fun, like old retro ones. I've got one or two of my own here, but I think in terms of like style and nostalgia and everything, for me, older like retro Macs are just a lot more fun. That's what I was more into in the time, with, especially because I was working on them, for a living. I was in high school, so it was really just spending money, but they resonated with me. And there was one occasion when we got a Mac TV I don't remember if it was a trade or if somebody just outright sold it to us. If you're not familiar, the Macintosh TV was a pretty rare machine. It was basically an LC520. It was an all-in-one, built-in 14-inch Trinitron screen. It was by no means the fastest machine of its time or anything, but it had a built-in TV tuner. And it came in a jet black case. And at that point in time, Apple didn't sell computers with TV tuners or desktops in black cases. All of them were that kind of off-white color that Apple called platinum. So the Mac TV by 1999 was a few years old, but it had already gained a bit of a cult following, and someone traded one in to us. And I remember seeing it out on the floor going, boy, this is cool. I've never seen one of these before. And I was familiar with what it was at the time, but the price tag was $100, I think. Maybe it was $150. It wasn't a ton of money. It was priced comparative to other computers from the year that it came out. But it wasn't priced compared to its actual value as like a relatively rare computer. And in the late 90s, retro computing didn't exist. Most computers like that just went off to get recycled because nobody cared. This one, I think the only reason why we bought it was because it was black and it looked cool. I don't remember who it was who actually took it in and bought it, but I don't think they quite understood what the machine was. And obviously whoever sold it to us didn't quite understand what the machine was worth because we probably paid about $50 for it if we retailed it for $100. But for whatever reason, and I'm still kicking myself about this to this day, I didn't buy it. Especially for like $100 or $150. It was definitely within my reach. And I should have bought it, but I didn't. And of course, the next day when I came into work after deciding, maybe I should make the boss an offer on it, it was gone. It had sold in like 2 days or a day or something like that. And that was the only Mac TV that I ever seen. And if I had one now, if I had bought that one and kept it, it'd probably be worth at least several $100, if not at least $1,000, depending on the condition that it's in. Some of those really rare Macs go for a ton of money. Same thing with PowerBooks back then. I wish I had bought or kept some of the really old PowerBooks that I had, because they'd still be worth a decent amount of money now. And of course, they'd be a lot of fun to play with. But continuing on with what, the store was all about, we sold computers. We also sold parts. We sold brand new parts and we sold used parts, and we tested everything that we sold, of course. I'd say that the prices were maybe a little bit higher than you would have paid through mail order or something like that, because obviously we were a small store, we had to make a markup. But we did carry a full complement of parts. That store was pretty much full, and I wish I could find pictures of the inside, because I know I had taken some back then. I just don't know what happened to them. Maybe years from now, I'll be cleaning out a drawer or a storage bin or a closet or my parents' basement or something, and I'll find them. But, unfortunately, I don't have them. But that store really was just jam-packed with parts. We sold printers, both new and used. We sold ink for the printers, which was decent margin, but not as high as you would think. And the reason was because we couldn't really get good deals on ink directly from distributors. So what the owners of the store would do, and this was very crafty of them, is they had a membership to Sam's Club. So they'd go over to Sam's Club and they'd buy the multi-pack of the ink cartridges, and then they just, take the multi-pack apart and label each cartridge separately. Apparently each cartridge came in like a retail kind of packaging, so it didn't look like somebody had just taken, an inkjet cartridge out of a box and slapped it on a shelf or whatever. But they would, they'd basically buy the ink to resell from Sam's Club, which, hey, it worked. It made us better margin than that. And we also sold monitors. We sold a couple of brands of new monitors, mostly ViewSonic and KDS, if I remember. Not necessarily like the super fancy high-end brands. We definitely wouldn't have been able to sell like Sony or anything like that. Probably just because of margins, distribution deals, and all that. But we got, decent brand new monitors. But the one thing that was kind of the bane of our existence, at least for those of us who had to work on the sales floor, were some of the refurbished monitors that we'd get. We'd carry used monitors, of course, but we wanted kind of a middle price option. And remember, these are all CRTs. We would get literally a pallet of 17-inch CRT monitors that were refurbished from Gateway. So these, like the cow spot boxes and everything like that, these were refurbished Gateway monitors. And I think they were like B grade refurbished, so they weren't even the best ones that you could get. And we'd have to test every single one of them, because if memory serves, the very first pallet of them that we bought, and of course the owners bought them because they were, in quotes, a good deal. The very first pallet of them that we bought, we had like 3 or 4 dead ones. And that did not go over very well with the customers who took them home and found them to be DOA. So whenever we got a new shipment of these refurbished monitors in, we'd have to kind of set up like a conga line where we'd take them all off the truck in the back, bring them into the store, find somewhere on the floor, the sales floor for them, and then unbox every single one of them and test them out to make sure that they worked and looked good and all that. Because if any of them were bad, we'd have to send them back to get credit or replacement or whatever. And we rightfully wanted to be the ones to discover the dead ones and not the customers. But 17-inch CRTs were not lightweight. And when you're talking a full pallet, so I'd like to say there were probably a good 16 or 20 monitors on a pallet. When you're talking that many and they're heavy, it got very tiring and very old very quick. But, we had to do it. The other maybe kind of fun story regarding monitors was where all the used monitors were at. Other than the ones set up as demos with some of the used computers we sold, we had a big, wall of shelves on one side of the store, and we had a bunch of monitors set up there, used ones. And we had them turned on and plugged in all the time so that customers could see, hey, look, these work, they look good and all that. So we had a couple of big VGA monitor splitters sitting there with one PC driving them. Well, you'd get sick of the Windows built-in screensavers after a while. The ball that turns into a cube, the multicolored thing, and then the maze one with the brick walls and all that. So at one point, we found a video capture card, like really basic video capture card. Remember, this was 99. And we stuck it in that computer, and then we figured, okay, well, we can hook up some kind of video source and display that. Well, at that point in time, I had gotten my N64. And I was just enamored with the N64, and I was kind of done playing my Sega Genesis, which I had gotten a few years prior. That was my very first game console, the Genesis that I didn't really want. I wanted a Super NES, but anyway. So I figure, okay, well, you know what? Games often have these demo modes. I'll bring in my Genesis, we can hook it up and just leave a cartridge, on the demo mode. So we did that. So I hooked up my Genesis to the capture card and just let it run real time, all the time. And I had, I think, the original Sonic in there, just looping through its demo mode. And you can tell this was not when retro gaming was a big deal either, because now I'm sure a lot of you are going, oh my God, you left your what? You left your Genesis at the store? How dare you? Back then, nobody cared. It was worth about $30. So, I left it there, and one day I had some kid come up to me and go, I know what you're doing. I'm like, what? He's like, I know what you're doing with the monitors on the wall. I'm like, what? Like they're the use ones. They're the demos. We're showing you how they work. And he goes, no, you're burning ROMs. I'm like, what? You're burning ROMs, man. Don't lie to me. I know you're doing it. This kid sincerely believed that somehow because Sonic the Hedgehog had a demo loop going on all these monitors, he had it in his head that somehow that meant we were burning ROMs. Now, I don't think he even understood what the term burning ROMs meant. But yeah, obviously that wasn't what was going on, because when you burn like data to ROM chips, you definitely don't look at the data as it's going. Like, I think in his mind, he thought that somehow burning game ROMs was equivalent to copying VHS tapes, where you do it in real time and you could actually watch the movie or TV show or whatever you were copying as it was doing it. That's the only thing I could think of, but the kid confused me for a little bit there. Like, what the hell, burning ROMs? Anyway, so that's the sales side. And the service department was by far, though, where the store made the bulk of its revenue. And I think that's the case with generally any place that sells and services things, especially car dealers. I mean, by far, car dealers, the sales department, I mean, they make some money, but service is really where the profit's at. And that was definitely the case for our store. We service both Windows and Mac computers. And because we were an independent store, we really kind of had to be on our toes, because we wouldn't just get one make or model of computer coming in. It's not like we were one of those gateway country stores. Remember those from back then? Where we would only take in like gateway computers to get serviced, or Dell or HP or whatever. We brought in, anything. If you had a broken computer, bring it in. We'll fix it for you. The only caveat was we couldn't do any manufacturer warranty work. So we would even work on Macs, but if your Mac was under warranty, I couldn't fix it under warranty. You had to go to, the store full of jerks. We'd be happy to fix your computer, but we'd have to charge you for it. But it kept us on our toes because we had to know a lot about a lot of different computers. And back then you would think, oh, computers were totally cookie cutter. Not quite. Case in point, we had a lot of Packard Bell computers come in for service. I would say mostly because they were very popular at the time and not necessarily because of their relatively poor build quality. But one thing on a lot of Packard Bells in the late 90s that commonly went bad was this incredibly stupid combo modem sound card. The thing was incredibly annoying because it was two functions merged into one, and if one of those functions failed, you had to replace both, and people really didn't like to hear that. The most common failure mode for those machines, that card, was people with dial-up. And a lot of them, remember, were living out in rural areas, so they had dial-up. And there were very long phone lines between them and the phone company. Lots of wire, lots of flat land. This was kind of an agricultural area. So lightning strikes were a common concern. And people generally got the memo when it came to using a surge protector to protect the power supply and everything in their computer, but they didn't necessarily realize that they needed to surge protect their phone lines as well. So a lot of times we'd get these machines in, especially during the summer, with at least that card totally fried because the phone line outside their house got hit by a lightning strike and ended up traveling through the phone lines into their house and frying that card. And they were pissed to hear when we told them, look, if you want this thing completely back up and functional again, we'd have to sell you not only a new modem, but also a new sound card. And we did keep some spares of those stupid Packard Bell cards around. The thing that sucked with those was finding the right drivers, because they had seemingly a million variants of that card and no two cards used the same drivers. And if memory serves, Packard Bell didn't really make the drivers easily accessible separately. Like if you needed to load new drivers for the hardware in your computer, they just assumed, hey, you just need to reload Windows. So you just get a restore disk, and that was it. So we had to know what we were doing, what was going on with general, computer hardware in that era, because it wasn't very cookie cutter at all. And some other fun stories, we'd have the occasional disaster machine that came in where, the power supply did get fried and it ended up frying the motherboard and a bunch of other parts. And, you had to tell the customer the sad story about, well, like over half of the parts in your computer are dead. You're probably better off buying a new one. And oh, by the way, you still owe us half an hour's worth of labor for the diagnostic time. Our labor rates were, if memory serves, $85 an hour, and we billed on half-hour increments. That seems like a lot, but back then I think it was actually pretty fair, pretty competitive with what other stores were doing at the time. And we generally would bring everything in where we'll just sell the customer a half an hour's worth of time. Like if the customer doesn't quite know what's going on, we would just sell them half an hour, call that diagnostic time. And if they wanted to continue with the repair, we'd waive a portion or all of that first half hour, to kind of help them out. Like I said, service was where we made a decent amount of money because the labor rate itself, you figure $85 an hour. I wasn't getting paid $85 an hour. None of my coworkers were getting paid $85 an hour. I think back then I was making like $7 an hour. And this is 99. It seems like nothing now, but a high schooler working part-time, making $7 an hour, $85 an hour. Yeah, the store was making some money off of that. So that definitely offset the relatively low margins that we had on everything else, right? With the exception of the used stuff. Used generally was good margin. But we brought in a lot of machines and we tried to crank through them as quickly as we could. I remember one particular time, a bit of a disaster, other than, customers who'd bring in computers that were just complete hot messes. One kind of self-inflicted mess, thankfully I didn't do it, but I had to clean up after it, was when we brought in computers, we'd have the customer fill out a form. We'd stick a label on the front of the computer with the last 4 digits of the customer's phone number, just as an easy way to identify it and keep it tied to the paperwork for it. And we'd put them on these big kind of shelves, freestanding shelf rack things in the back area, back where the service department was. We had all these shelves at different heights. So the idea was the heavier the item, the lower shelf you'd put it on, because it kind of makes sense. So lighter items like laptops would go on the upper shelves. And we had these plastic totes that we could put accessories and stuff in to keep them together. And the idea is you'd take one of those same labels and you'd put that on the tote with the phone number on it so you could keep it together. Somebody brought in an Apple PowerBook, and I can't remember what model, but they brought one in on a repair. I think it was even just like a software problem. I think they just wanted like the OS reloaded or whatever. But the person who brought it in, and again, I swear it wasn't me who brought it in and did this, but They put the power brick and the laptop itself in one of these totes. But the laptop was bigger than the tote, so it sat in the tote at kind of an angle. And they put the tote on the shelf. But what they didn't realize was the laptop being at an angle, kind of sticking out of the tote a little bit, made the tote a bit top heavy. And apparently at some point later in the day, somebody bumped the shelf, and that tote was on the end of the shelf. And you can guess what happened. The whole thing just took a spill from about 6 feet up. Just smashed their laptop horribly. And so I came in, looked at this, went, what in the hell happened here? And they explained to me what happened. And I'm like, all right, here's the deal. I'll fix this, but I'm not going to be the one to call the customer and tell them what happened. So the owner called the customer, told him what happened, told him, look, we'll get it completely fixed up. If memory serves, what we actually ended up doing was buying another used unit in the same shape, if not better, and transferring over all the parts we needed to. I know all the case plastics are ruined. I think the screen was broken. I'd like to say it kind of came down to the point where we basically just transferred over their RAM and their hard drive to the other machine. And of course, I don't think we even charged them at all for that repair, even for what it originally came in on. I think it's just like, look, we ruined this bad enough here. Here's your computer. We fixed it. We even fixed the original problem. Please, don't tell your friends that we suck or anything like that. Another fun story that I remember was we had the TechBench PC. In the back, we had two computers, TechBench PC and TechBench Mac. And these were just computers the store owned for the techs to use when we need to get on the internet, download drivers, burn CDs, anything like that. So the TechBench PC had a CD burner in it. And it also had a zip drive in it. And this was the Napster era. And I didn't have a CD burner at home. So you can kind of put two and two together as to what sometimes I would do, like during lunch break or whatever, bring in some blank CDs in a zip disk. What was totally awesome was the software at the time. I'm trying to remember the name. What was it? Easy CD Creator, something like that. That version at the time had just added the ability to convert MP3 files on the fly. So you could feed it a bunch of MP3s and it would turn them into like the WAV audio files that it would need to burn to an audio disk. Anyway, that TechBench PC, though, one day we're back there and we hear a pop and a little fizz, and then we start smelling the magic smoke. And if you've worked in electronics long enough, you know what the magic smoke is and what it smells like, right? And we're like, uh-oh. And we go figure out where the source of it was, and it's the TechBench PC, and we look around back, and literally there are flames licking out the back of the power supply. Like the power supply had caught on fire. And we're kind of looking through the grate in the back, and like the inside of the computer is glowing. So we quick, freak out, pull all the cables out, shut the thing down, take it outside, air it out. We pull the side panel off, and like it had shot sparks inside the computer somehow. Like the motherboard had like this big hole burned in the middle of it. And if memory serves, it had like some kind of power surge had also happened. So it killed the hard drive. It killed the floppy drive. I'm trying to remember what else it killed. I think it killed all the expansion cards. Thankfully, the CD burner was safe. So that's the one thing I was very happy about. I think the memory and the CPU was still safe. But yeah, that was a fun one to try to explain to the owners as to why the TechBench PC was broken and why we needed to expense a bunch of parts off of the sales floor to get it up and running again. Another story, although this one isn't necessarily funny, but it's one I will absolutely never forget. The TechBench Mac was this older Power Mac. It was a Power Mac 7200, which even when it was brand new was by no means one of the best machines. It was not a great computer to begin with brand new, and as a used machine, it wasn't any better. And as a very cranky old used machine, it was downright frustrating. The thing would crash all the time. Half the time it didn't want to power back on. There were definitely some hardware problems going on with it, but because Macs were the red-headed stepchildren back then, the owners didn't really want to spend a whole ton of money on it. After starting to see more and more Mac service come in, and how I was struggling with this machine, and some of the other techs who also helped me out with some of the Mac service, how they were struggling with that machine, the owners issued a challenge. Now, we didn't work on commission. We had sales goals, but they weren't like you need to sell 6 full systems this month or anything like that, or sell 20 printers or anything like that. It was all just, based on dollar amounts. If you sell, we want you to sell X amount of, money in sales this month. And I think for me, because I was part-time, and only half of the time when I was working was when I was actually doing service work, the other half I was out on the sales floor. They normally set my sales floor quota at like $1,000 a month. If I sold $1,000 worth of stuff a month, then, I'd get my sales bonus, which was like 10% or something like that. It wasn't a ton. And that was the same deal for all the other people, even the people who were just salespeople. We all had sales goals, but no commission. They issued me a challenge. They said, all right, Colin, we understand that you're having such problems with this machine. We will go out and buy you a brand new computer, a brand new TechBench Mac. But you need to hit a sales goal of $3,000 for the month. And that was obviously a lot more than I had ever done before. And it was quite a challenge. And I'm like, all right, you know what? I'm going to give it a shot. Because worst case scenario, hey, they owe me, a bonus off of that money. So even if I fall short and don't get the new computer, hey, I get a little bit more money or whatever. So I tried to get better shifts. I tried to be more present on the sales floor, try to, do a better job juggling time between working on systems to get fixed and being out on the floor to actually help customers. So I could actually, try and help towards the sales goal. And, it was slow going, but I was definitely making headway. Definitely going to surpass what I would normally do in a month, but I probably wasn't going to quite make it. And the rest of the staff, who was mostly part-time as well, because this was retail, most of the rest of the staff actually found out about this challenge as well. And this is the part I'll never forget. They all understood how important getting that new TechBench computer was. And they also knew that I was only working like 20 hours a week because I was in high school at the time. And they knew that Mac service was increasing in terms of volume, and service in general made the store a decent amount of money. What I found out after the fact was that periodically, when my coworkers would ring people up, they would actually ring the sale up under me. They'd put in my, salesperson code, which is the first thing you'd have to do when you'd go to ring somebody up. That they would actually periodically put mine in instead of their own. And sometimes these were bigger sales, like, monitors and printers and stuff that was a couple $100. I think somebody even sold a used system under my code. And ultimately, we managed to squeak it out. I got a little bit over the $3,000 or whatever it was. And next thing I know, there's a brand new blue and white Power Mac G3 still in its box, sitting on my section of the TechBench for me to set up and enjoy. And I will never forget that, because, in this day and age where you feel like the world is a horrible place and that everyone out there is evil and everyone out there is jerks and there is, no good anymore to be had, that's the one memory that I go back to. Because my coworkers were willing to even give up some of their own bonus money in order to help me out with that one. So that worked out very well. I loved that machine. I wish I could have kept it. I actually had another blue and white for a while that I'd picked up used. And you know what? Someday I'm going to buy another one because I just think that industrial design was really cool. The whole teal and translucent kind of scheme. And some people think that it was a kid's toy, whatever. I don't care. It was a very formidable time of my life. If you're in high school, that's when some of your strongest memories are made. And, I had a rough time in elementary and high school. And so work was really a good outlet for me. It was where I didn't feel like I was the weirdo because I was surrounded by other weirdos, right? We all sold and worked on computers. So it all worked out really well. But I remember that machine, and someday I'll get another one just like it. But that was a cool computer, and it really helped out quite a bit. I ended up getting a CD burner and everything for it. So it definitely paid for itself in terms of, the amount of service revenue I was able to generate that much faster because I had the better machine. But, overall, that was a great experience, I think. Work in retail, I'm not going to lie, work in retail sucks. It's for a certain kind of person. It's for a certain kind of mindset. If you've worked retail for a long period of time and you enjoy it, more power to you, because day after day dealing with customers who are jerks and think that they should always get their way when they're completely wrong, that gets really old and really tiring, and it just grinds on you. And I only did that specific job for a couple of years. And, I still probably wouldn't trade it. I probably wouldn't trade that experience for anything else, because it taught me so much in terms of how to interact with other people. It taught me so much as to how businesses worked, and it taught me a really good work ethic as to how do you move up? How do you, get raises? How do you get more responsibility? How do you earn the respect of your coworkers? That sort of thing. So while it could be stressful at times, while we'd occasionally have people come in and yell and scream and look like they wanted to trash the place and shoot us and, punch us in the face and do all sorts of other stuff, I still wouldn't trade those memories, because ultimately, and maybe this is just the fact that it's been almost 20 years talking, ultimately, I'm remembering those pretty favorably. So I am, of course, curious as to your thoughts. Do you have any similar stories of your own, either working in retail, working in IT, computers, technology just completely blowing up on you, customers freaking out, that sort of thing? Any other favorite memories of retro computing from back in the days when it really wasn't retro computing? I'm just curious. Be sure to leave those all down in the comments below. So if you like this one, I would appreciate a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at thisdoesnotcomp. And as always, thanks for watching.